readily to contribute to this celebration of John Keats. Our array of events would be incomplete without this highly anticipated exploration of Keats and his all too brief poetic career by an eminent contemporary poet. First of all, I would like to formally welcome our principal, Dr. B. Unikrishnan, who gave us the go-ahead and supported us throughout this endeavor. Although he's a physics professor, he's someone who who cherishes a passion for literature in his heart too. Our speaker of the day, Shri K. Jayakumar, poet, lyricist, and translator of the works of Khalil Gibran and Rumi, was our preeminent choice to help us delve deep into the exquisite poetry of Keats. It is my honor to welcome you, sir, on this occasion on behalf of the Department of English, University College. I welcome the teachers and research scholars from various institutions who have made the time to be part of this event. I also extend a warm welcome to all the students here and to the teachers of my own department who are part of this event even in the midst of the vaccination woes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our principal, Dr. B. Unikrishnan sir, unfortunately could not be here. However, he has sent us a voice note for his presidential address, which I will be playing now. Kindly give me a moment.
Hello.
Our former principal, Babu sir, is also here. I take this opportunity to welcome him also to this event. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Apologies to everyone due to unforeseen technical difficulty. I would not be able to play the audio. However, in the recorded video that will be presented to you after, we'll certainly make sure to include the same. Allow me to continue. Let me please welcome Shri K. Jayakumar sir, who we all know and who does not need an introduction. He's a lyricist, he's a poet. Apart from that, he's worked in the civil service arena and has been an inspiration to so many youngsters. His lyrics, as melodious as they are passed on to generations and we all enjoy them. Allow me to please welcome Dr. K. Jayakumar sir for the commemorative lecture on celebrating Keats.
Morning, everybody, and Rajendran, Aishwarya, of course. I recognize you, Unikrishnan, and the Department of English, and participants to this talk, online talk. I'm happy to be associated with this commemorative event where we are recalling one of the greatest poets of English, not only greatest, one of the most dearest, one of the dearest poets of English literature, John Keats. I think when we recall his name, it is not that fiery expression or that dynamism that you associate with Shelley or the adventures of Byron, or the philosophical aura of Wordsworth, or the intellectual acumen of Coleridge. but it is a different kind of aura that we see around Keats, and we associate with the name of Keats. There is a melancholy associated with it. There is a cool freshness associated with it. And there is a deep, not only melancholy, but there is a depth, there is a beauty, there is charm, there is quietude. There is something mysterious about this young boy, if I may say so, because he died 4 months after he was 25. His duration on earth was limited to 25 years and 4 months, starting from October 31st of 1795 to 23rd of February 1821. Exactly 200 years ago, this young poet passed away in Italy. When I was asked to give this lecture, rather thoughtlessly, I agreed. I'm not a teacher these days, although I started my career as a teacher. And I think I would have been a fairly okay teacher had I continued. But I strayed into civil service, if I may say so. I strayed into civil service. And then I had this great longing to be in a campus, great longing to be a teacher. So whatever you long for very deeply normally gets, it happens. It is rewarded. Likewise, I joined the service, so I cannot be a teacher because I never passed your UGC examinations or whatever, So God said me that I cannot make you a teacher because you didn't complete your PhD. I started with my Eliot, with T.S. Eliot. I did for one year of research on Eliot after my MA. Then none of these examinations I passed. Of course, I got into IAS, but this longing to be in a campus, to be a teacher, was, I think, very deep-rooted in me. That is why, towards the end of my career, or rather after I retired, God felt that this guy's one wish has to be fulfilled. Therefore, as I did not have a UGC NET exam, I cannot be posted as a professor or a teacher. So God said, okay, I'll make you a vice chancellor, for which God had his permissions. And as the first vice chancellor, I don't have to be an academic. So this idea was put into the mind of the then chief minister, saying that this guy wanted to be in a campus all the time. So ask him to create a campus and be the vice chancellor there. That is how, from the age of 60 to 65, I was far away from Trivandrum in Tirur, trying to create a university for Malayalam out of nothing. We did create a university, and I'm very proud of that university because although I'm a student of English literature, I am equally a student of Malayalam literature. And I could create a university for Malayalam. People mistake the university as a university which teaches only MA English or something. No, it is not a university which teaches only MA in English, MA in Malayalam. But we teach all postgraduate courses in the medium of Malayalam. In the medium of Malayalam, they learn history, they learn environmental science, they learn cinema, they learn media, all these things, So that is what that university is all about, and that is how we can make a university relevant. Anyway, I don't want to go into that. When I was asked to talk about Keats, I readily agreed, basically because of that ancient desire in me to be a teacher, unfulfilled desire to be a teacher. I taught only for a few months. But then although I agreed readily, I later realized that choice of a topic is difficult because you as researchers and students and teachers go into the nitty-gritties of the subject. As Wordsworth said, we murder to dissect. You murder to dissect, you take out a topic and you dissect it, and in the process, poetry is lost, that happens. And if you read great criticism about or essays about poetry, we'll have to search for poetry in it. I am a practicing poet, so I shall be contented content not with analysis and dissection, but by an empirical appreciation of poetry. So please do not be beguiled. Don't be beguiled by my promise of making a commemorative lecture. I am going to be not an academically, I'm not going to give you an academically correct lecture, but a creative lecture or an appreciation by a poet. I'm also in the, I also consider myself in the long tradition of poets. I'm also one among them. Therefore, as a practicing poet, how do I appreciate, how do I approach Keats? I think that would be more relevant and more honest on my part to talk about Keats. As I said, whenever we remember Keats, there is a sense of melancholy, there is a sense of charm, there's a sense of great beauty, there is a great sense of immense beauty and depth in this young poet. So I thought this topic to be called as celebrating Keats. Of course, what is there to celebrate about Keats? So I'll just elaborate on the word celebrating Keats. Keats, of course, as I said, lived only for 25 years and 4 months. Now, what is to be celebrated is that this young poet, his creative life, the span of his creative life is only 7 years. It might appear as incredible, but he started writing it somewhere around 1814, and he went away by 1821. Out of which 7 years, the last 1 year was an unproductive year because the poet was sick. And he was away, I think, by end of September 1820, he sailed to Rome and to Italy. And the last 1 year was fairly unproductive, which effectively means that his writing career is merely 6 years. Now, to become one of the most outstanding poets of English literature by devoting 6 years of your life to poetry is perhaps the most incredible, most marvelous, most mysterious accomplishments in literature. Even if you live for 100 years, you may not achieve anything. As Ashan, Kumaran Ashan said, rather than being a stone, and then it's the life of a lightning, far more desirable than being a dead stone for hundreds of years. Lightning flashes only for a few seconds, but it illuminates the world when it flashes. Is not that life desirable than the long life of a stone? That is what Ashan says. Of course, Ashan has also been deeply inspired by Keats, and he also had an untimely death at the age of 50 or 51. So this 6 years of productive life is what makes Keats an object of great mystery even today, and to write something which is abiding. So the 6 years.
Sir, your audio is off.
Okay. Now, unlike other romantic poets, Keats, although he was very young, he had a great fascination for the epic. In fact, his concept of poetry, if you go through his letters and his notings, he has a great idea of being an epic poet. His poetic imagination was epic in its content and nature. He had a fascination to write epic poems. That is why he started with Endymion, Hyperion. They may not be great works, but then his fascination with the epic poetry, something like Milton wrote. Milton was one of his great sources of inspiration, although his poetic accomplishments are slightly different from Milton's. But this kind of epic proportions, epic characters, epic action, and the conception itself, he conceives the poetic drama in that epic proportions. That is why he was very fond of King Lear. He was very fond of Shakespeare. He is not one of those romantic poets in the typical sense where you are inspired by one side. I'm not belittling anybody, but that is how the romantic poetic imagination works. The Wordsworthian idea of images flowing one after the other and spontaneous overflow and all those things. I don't think for Keats it was never a spontaneous overflow, because the smithy of his imagination was more epic in its nature than romantic. He was not immediately responding to things, but there has been a deep synthesis that was going on in his mind, and that is where his Hellenic, his Greek, Grecian fascination also helps him, because of course, like in Milton and Spenser and Shakespeare were his sources, like and many others, of course. His engagement with Greek mythology is actually an extension of his fascination for, or his penchant for, writing something of epic dimensions. You see, nobody, a young poet at the age of 18 or 20, generally does not attempt something like Hyperion or Endymion. Long poems, very narrative poems with with a very strong narrative and a story and a narrative content to it. Normally, young poets would attempt smaller poems related to the contemporary society and things like that. And Romanticism was rooted in contemporary society also, although it had fascination for the past things and rural life and all those things. But it was all a reaction to the post-industrial society of England. As far as Keats is concerned, he seems to be preeminently blind to the surroundings, or rather the present situation of the society. Am I audible? Is there a problem with my audio or something?
You're
Okay.
audible, sir.
Okay. Now, his approach to Greek mythology was different. Unlike Shelley, his approach was entirely different, and I think his fascination with the epic poetry is what makes Keats different. Now I come to the main point of what I wanted to say. Keats, although he is a very young poet who departed from this world at the age of 25, and he never had a death wish or anything. He wanted to live. He wanted to live, and he even thought that he has not done much as far as his poetry or his poetic output is concerned. In one of the letters, he says that I have not left anything worthwhile. In a letter he wrote from Rome, he says, if I should die, I have left no immortal work behind me, nothing to make my friends proud of my memory. But I have loved the principle of beauty in all things, and if I had had time, I would have made myself remembered. What a sad statement, but untrue, because he had left something immortal, which probably he did not understand that they are going to be immortal. But what I'm trying to say is, this poet had, I don't say a premonition about death, but he was acutely aware about immortality and about the mortality of his life and human life. Particularly about his mortality, although he, as I said, he never had a death wish or anything, but he was acutely aware of his mortality. And that is why he is always fascinated by anything immortal. And beauty, poetry, truth, all these things were for him symbols or objects of immortality. They represented immortality. His whole life was a struggle. Rather, his poetry was a struggle of mortality against immortality. I think that is, if he must have written about so many things, but if we may, sort of subtract and bring it down to one essential engagement. What was the one essential poetic, thematic engagement that stirred the poet in him? Is his perennial or his permanent, his eternal or his constant preoccupation with this theme of mortality versus immortality. How do I touch these fringes of immortality, mortal even as I am? I think this and the theory he discovered, or rather he invented, was beauty is something which transcends mortality. Beauty transcends mortality. That is why he made this famous statement in Endymion: a thing of beauty is a joy forever. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Actually, there is a rational mistake in the statement. A thing of beauty cannot be a source of, it cannot be joy forever. It can only be beauty that can be source of joy forever. It is abstract beauty that can outlast mortality. A thing will always perish. A thing will always perish, but beauty will not perish. That is what probably the young poet wanted to convey when he said, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. Beauty is a source of joy forever, is primarily his idea. And that is what made him deeper and deeper into poetry. He committed deeper and deeper into poetry because poetry for him was a thing of beauty. And through that object of beauty or the processing of beauty, he could touch immortality. Mortality and immortality is basically his greatest concern. I think he was subconsciously, he was not even aware that he is aware of this. But then, you see, poets are very close to God and they have very evolved souls. They do not know that. Their external manifestations may not reflect their acute awareness about truth. So poets have an acute awareness about truth, as Wordsworth would say, heightened sensibility. This heightened sensibility is nothing but the awakening of their soul, awakening of their consciousness. They really do not know, and even English language did not have that kind of terminology to describe it. Actually, Keats is a very awakened soul. He's a very awakened soul. His consciousness has risen to a very higher level than what we would expect in a 25-year-old English poet. He was not aware about the Eastern terminology about yoga or Kundalini or anything. I'm not saying, I'm not dragging the discourse into that. But then his awareness about truth, his awareness about existence, his awareness about death, mortality, all these things were on a heightened plane, not by his training. He was not a precocious poet. He was not a scholar poet. He was a pure poet, no doubt. But through that pure poetry, I think his soul or his consciousness was alerted by some internal source of inspiration and consciousness. That is how he could say something like beauty is truth, truth beauty. Basically, it reminds us Indians about the proverbial saying Satyam Shivam Sundaram, isn't it? And how did these early rishis or the sages of India, how did they come to this utterance, Satyam Shivam Sundaram? Because in their stages of heightened consciousness, they could perceive this immense beauty in their consciousness, immense beauty, and that beauty is nothing but the energy of life, Shivam, and that is Satyam, and that is the truth. There is only one truth, and that is this beauty, and that is his great life force. Satyam Shivam Sundaram is the ultimate utterance of enlightenment. If you can internalize this fact that there is only one truth, and that truth is beauty, and that beauty is eternal, I think Satyam Shivam Sundaram translates into Keatsian terminology as beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And he further says that is all you should know. That is Ekam Satyam. That is the only truth that is worth knowing. That is what he says. Keats may not be conscious about what he wrote. In that flash when internal consciousness strikes him or flowers inside him, he could come out with these great utterances. Because this poet's perpetual engagement, constant engagement with what is truth and what is it that outlasts mortality. How did he come to these great odes that has really made him immortal? The 5 great odes. These odes, particularly Ode on Grecian Urn. That Grecian Urn, the Ode on Grecian Urn is something which quintessentially is a mediation between mortality and immortality. Isn't it? The urn has passed on centuries and come to us as an object of beauty. And through that object of beauty, he negotiates mortality and touches or feels instinctively the beauty of truth, the eternalness of truth, the eternity of truth. I think Keats needs to be analyzed in greater detail and through new scientific and even Oriental wisdom. Keats has to be approached through Oriental wisdom. I'm not saying that everything Indian is great. I'm not into that mold where everything Indian is great. I'm not. But then Indian philosophy about truth. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Ekam Satyam Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. There is only one truth, and great men talk about it in different languages. Likewise, Keats had this glimpse of truth, and that is what makes his great odes so condensed in its content. Its language is so condensed, it cannot be condensed further. Particularly Ode to Autumn, the final, that poetry cannot reach, poetry cannot achieve more condensation and more maturity and more fecundity than this kind of that Ode to Autumn. I think it was also coincidental that somebody should write Ode to Autumn when his life was in its spring. It ought to be in its spring, but then he already foresaw autumn, and he had to say goodbye. This poet had a acute sense of truth, which he was not aware. He was not conscious about what he was saying, but then truth spoke to him, whispered to him. Truth whispered to him in its moments of enlightenment. And how does he achieve moments of enlightenment? But what he, I don't say erroneously, but he rather mysteriously called negative capability, nothing but your ability to empathize. In that deep moment of empathy, it is not something like people like us saying that ayo kashtam. You see somebody poor or somebody having trouble with something, and instinctively we all say ayo kashtam. We really do not say any kashtam. We do not say feel any kashtam. It's a reflex action. It's a very superficial reflex action. But we think that we have empathized with that person. We do not. Empathy is a very complicated process. Real, true, poetic empathy, philosophical empathy is a very complicated process, which makes it a condition precedent that your ego has to dissolve. That is what happens when this poet listens to the outpouring of a nightingale. Outpouring of a nightingale. You and I have, even today also, there was a quail singing in my mango tree. But I do not empathize with it. I say it is good. Oh, very mischievous bird is singing. That is all you think. It keeps on singing with a kind of vengeance, as it were, or trying to prove a point to its rival or something like that. You listen to some time. In between, you read your newspapers, you listen to your radio, you attend your mobile phone, still you listen to this quail song. Okay, there is no empathy. How do you empathize? If you empathize, you are not there. Your ego boundaries have to vanish. Your ego boundaries have to vanish, and you dissolve in that object of your empathy. That is empathy. And that is what Keats talk about negative capability. You are incapable of being yourself. You have to dissolve in that object or in that process of whatever you want to empathize with. So in that moment of complete empathy where the poet is not, but only that song remains, the poet becomes part of that song, then in that state of samadhi, if I may say so, or epiphany, if I may use a James Joycean terminology, in that state of epiphany, you do not exist, but your consciousness alone exists. In that consciousness, which is one with that object of your imagination or of your listening, that song, eternal truths come within you. It visits you, and that is what has made these great odes eternal, because they come from the eternal. They come from the vistas of eternity. They come from the vistas of eternity, and it strikes the poet because there the poet doesn't exist. It is only his consciousness that exists in that moment of empathy or epiphany, if I may say so. These are all epiphanic odes. Without that epiphany or samadhi or satori, whatever you call it, these are all products of satori, as the Zen Buddhists would say, where you see beyond what your eyes can see. You hear beyond what your ears can see. You go beyond what your mind can take, where your mind can take you. This is beyond the mind, beyond the senses. That is how Keats had been. Keats was blessed with this great felicity of complete dissociation of himself in this association. He dissociates himself, or rather, he is not there. That is the kind of empathy, that kind of supreme empathy. That is what he meant by negative capability, I suppose. And in that great truths, he is able to access the great truths of humanity, and that is how he could produce this kind of great poetry. Greek mythology came to him initially as an aid, whereby he associated it with immortality, where man could become God, where the eternal in man was that is what attracted Keats initially. And he also struggles, to come to this, to discover this great aspect of eternity of beauty. Poetry was his subject. Basically, poetry, the process of poetry, and poetry, beauty, truth, all these things were his major themes. If you ask what are his themes, poetry is his theme. Poetry is the theme of his poetry. Poetry, its eternality, its eternal nature of poetry, eternal nature of beauty, and how does a mortal poet transcend his mortality to sort of embrace this mortality. I think John Keats is perhaps the most mysterious of the Romantic poets. Because he died young, scholarship has a tendency to look upon him as a great poet, no doubt. Greatness was given, accorded to him, though reluctantly later. During his lifetime, nobody recognized him as a great poet. In fact, there were contemporary writings which said poets like John Keats would be one of those minor poets. There are so many eminent poets of those times who are now considered as minor poets. But history redeemed Keats and elevated him as one of the greatest poets. I think Keats need to be studied even further with the eye of the Orient, as I said, with the great philosophy of India. In the great pursuit of truth, Indian philosophy has accessed many mysteries of the mind. I think Keats deserves to be studied with a new tabula rasa, as they say, with an unconditioned mind. We should be unconditioned, and we should only try to understand how his mind worked, how his subconscious mind worked. This man had never any kind of joy in his life, He had to look after his brother. His elder brother left, youngest sister, much younger to him. Affair with this what's her name? Fanny Brown was, of course, it gave him some kind of a joy, but it never succeeded. And I don't think he had many women friends also, girlfriends also. He had a very lackluster life. He did not enjoy the great things, and unlike Shelley or Byron, he did not indulge in life. His physical circumstances were so limited. His only adventure was he went to the northern Scotland and all that. But even that had left indelible marks in his sensibility. So a very odd kind of genius who visited the earth for 25 years, imbibed all he could, and he wanted to be immortal. And all his poetry was his great aspiration to immortalize his genius. I think he has succeeded to a great extent. It is in our interest to go deeper into his poetic craft and even understand the subconscious dynamics of his poetry and his poetic craft, and come out with new theses and new ideas of how he arrived at the Satyam Shivam Sundaram statement in this brief life of 25 years. It is indeed a great feat. How would a young poet come to this kind of supreme poetic utterance? Supreme poetic utterance, as our earlier Professor M. Krishnan used to make this, be very, very fond of this phrase, supreme poetic utterance. Like Keats has made so many supreme poetic utterances. How was it possible for him? He is not an academic, he is not a scholar, but then he had something innate in him which befriended him with, or rather which took him to the heights of great poetry, because he always was in love with great poetry. He was always in love with greatness. He was always in love with immortality. And immortality is something truthful, because truth is always immortal. And that which is immortal and that which is truth is what for him was beauty. And his entire poetry was an attempt to negotiate, to touch, to befriend, to embrace these great vistas, eternal vistas of beauty. And I think in his, out of his mortal frame, this great soul is basking in the glory of beauty, truth, and immortality. It is for mortals like us, left to us, to understand this great dynamics, this mysterious dynamics of this great, the working of the poet, of this great mind of this great poet. With these few words, I will stop now. If you have any questions, we can share the ideas. I don't say that I'll answer your questions. I'll try to sort of approach them. And I think I've already spoken for 20 minutes. That is all I promised, because you teachers are used to, conditioned for talking for 50 minutes and 10 minutes of pandemonium in the class. So I am used to 20 minutes. So I think I have done whatever I thought about Keats. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful lecture. May I please invite our dearest teacher, Kaikasi ma'am, for moderating the question and answer session.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful lecture on John Keats, one of the most beloved poets of all time. And now it's the time for a brief question answer session. Those of you who have anything to ask to sir, you can directly post questions or you can type it on the comment box.
Don't ask me questions from your syllabus. I have not seen your syllabus.
We are yet to receive some questions. Sir, I have a question to ask you.
Please.
Sir, you have, in the modern times, you have poets from the past being misrepresented, misquoted, and criticized for their lack of sensibility on a variety of issues, including gender issues and other things. So how do you read Keats on this basis, because he was not somebody who was, you can say that, very sensitive to so many issues which we consider politically correct right now. So what is your take on that?
I'm happy that you asked this question, because this has been bothering me quite some time. Not only about Keats, but whenever I read an academic paper or an article in a journal or a magazine, where older poets and writers are criticized for their wrong views or the wrong stance they have taken, I think it is the myopia of modern academia, if I may use a very provocative expression. It is the myopia of the academia to think that a poet writing in 1800 could have anticipated what the world is going to be in 2000. How do we? We only react. How do we know that how the world is going to be in 2300 or whatever 2000, 2100 or whatever? We do not know. We do not know what is going to be the society like. What are the values, abiding values of society, say after 50 years or 100 years. You respond to your situation. And you are guided and controlled by what is prevailing in that particular time, isn't it? And we presume that the poet ought to have rebelled against that kind of system. The poet ought to have taken a very correct stand. It is not humanly possible. Many of the stands that we are taking today vis-a-vis many subjects would be treated or would be judged as incorrect maybe after 100 years. Our approach to environment would be criticized so much. Maybe, I don't know. Our approach to technology would be an object of great criticism maybe after 200 years. We do not know what is going to happen. Therefore, we should always, academic criticism should always try to contextualize the writer in the society in which he lived. Of course, if that society had very anti-human elements, which were supposed to be inhuman at that time, And if he had taken a very anti-progressive view, yes, of course. But in those days, there were no such contrary views for him to take. Therefore, it is a very unfair practice to judge writers of a different period by the canons of the modern period. I think that is what I would call myopia of the academia. I think we should try to to contextualize the writers in their period and find out whether in that period itself they were sort of backward looking. That of course we can say, but then the context we cannot drag them into the modern context and interrogate them. It is unfair. It is unkind, dragging somebody from 18th century into 21st century and saying that, look, you were anti-women, you were anti-feminist, you were anti-environment, you were anti-democracy, you were pro-king. Nothing. Please contextualize them. I think that is, I always felt this kind of, when I read articles, it's very unfair. Even Shri Krishna is being accused of so many things. Mahabharata is being interrogated by modern canons. Of course, you can do this exercise because if a journal will publish an article, by all means, go ahead and do it. But then, that is not fair. That's not fair. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have a comment by Parshuraman sir, who belongs to our department. It's not exactly a question, where he asks, quite a few Western poets need to be seen through Indian philosophical lenses too, actually. I think he agrees to your statement that,
Okay.
Keats has to be read in the context of Indian philosophical ideas.
I can say one
Parshu sir, do you
question.
have anything to say? Yeah.
Somebody was. Yeah.
Parshu sir, do you have anything more to add to this?
No, I was just making an observation that,
Okay, thank you, sir.
particularly in English literature, we are taught to see through Western lens, but the Indian lens should be given equal importance because they have looked at us through their systems. So why shouldn't we look at them through our systems?
Basically, the idea should be to arrive at a greater understanding, a depth of understanding. If any tool, Indian tool or Buddhist tool or whatever, use any tool so that we can appreciate and understand the mystery of, there is a great mystery about the creativity, Nobody can really sort of fathom it. You cannot describe it in normal terminology. It's a very, very complex process. Even a small poet like me, even I wonder sometimes if I write a good poem, after some time when I read it, oh, good. I pat on my back. Good. Even small poet, a minor poet like me, would compliment myself for writing some good poem, So the process is very intriguing, mysterious.
Okay, I can say I would
Yes.
like to ask one
Yeah.
question.
Okay, sir.
Jayakumar sir, I am Krishna Kumar from English department. Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful lecture because I haven't seen many have quoted this, particularly to explain Keats in the light of an Indian philosophical lens. It's really wonderful and rare. And I would like to ask one question, one clarification. Why? Because particularly in Western philosophy, everything is created for man. For example, in Bible, the earth itself is created for man. But in Indian philosophy, we are a part of it. In Pulkodi Tumbilum Jeevan Kanaga, and we are a part of it. So in that sense, I think there may be a basic difference between these philosophies. And another thing is that in Keats' viewpoint, in Order Creation, two lovers, lover and beloved, they're going to kiss, and that picture is got framed, so that kiss has become a joy forever because that kiss is just an object, but still that kiss is not happening. So that picture itself becomes a joy forever. So that isn't a thing of beauty itself. So that is just my doubt.
No, it is there. But then we also are familiar with heard melodies are sweet, those unheard are sweeter. If he had kissed, the beauty would have gone. The unkissed kiss is better than a kissed kiss.
Yes.
I think it is a
Yes,
quotable quote. An unkissed kiss is better than a kissed kiss. Therefore,
Yes, sir. But isn't there a basic difference between the Western and Indian philosophy
that of
like
course,
that?
that's a good point. This is a homocentric or a man-centric. You see, the whole idea of Western Renaissance is all about man supremacy. That is why when Edmund Hillary climbs Everest, they say Everest, I have conquered Everest. No Indian would say that I have conquered Everest. Everest has permitted me to touch its feet or touch its top. That is all. We are part of nature. That is the basic philosophy. In fact, what is the basic problem in today's developmental discourse? That is because somebody thinks that all this nature is for me to destroy and plunder and loot. Whereas the real Indian philosophy would say that you revere this nature, you worship this nature, you are part of it. You are part of it. You are not distinct from it. In all our development discourse also this is happening. Environmentalists are saying that you are part of nature. In fact, the world is coming to that kind of an integrated approach. But before that, we will do all kinds of blunders and plunders before wisdom dawns on us. Therefore, it is imperative that we are able to look into Western poetry with the eyes of an integrated philosophy like that of India, where everything is knit into one whole. There is nothing beyond this. We are all part of this. That is what the modern science is, the web of life. We are all part of this one large web. Whereas Western philosophy says everything is for me to loot. And then there is a Tamil song which says, "In the ulagam பிறந்தது எனக்காக, இந்த பூமி பிறந்தது எனக்காக." அப்படி இல்லை. உங்களுக்கு part தான். You are not, the bhumi has not been born, has been made for me to enjoy. No, that is a Western way of indulgence. That is what has made Western civilization quite problematic and leading to this great destruction of this planet Earth. In fact, Gandhi had foreseen it when he wrote Hind Swaraj. In the last century itself, Gandhi foresaw this. And nationalism. I translated Tagore's speeches on nationalism, that book on nationalism. I translated into Malayalam. It has gone for print. Oh, Tagore he's talking volumes against this Western nationalism, the Western idea of state, Western nationalism, and Western idea of looting, colonization. Colonialism is an offshoot of this idea of the Western man's idea of his power or his freedom or his authority to conquer. Who gave him the authority to conquer other countries? His idea that I have the mandate or the authority to conquer Earth, therefore I am going and conquering colonies also. This political manifestation of this philosophy is colonization. The scientific and economic manifestation of this is the destruction of the environment that we see today. And the philosophical manifestation is that beyond man, you cannot see anything. That is where we have to revisit Keats, where Keats had this kind of integrated vision, although it has not been explored fully. Thank you very much for broaching that subject, which is very dear to me. In fact, recently I read a book which is available in Madhrubhumi, has brought out, which talks about Lalita Jeevitham. The book is called Lalita Jeevitham, Simple Life. When we were locked down in February, March last year, I thought that what is the use of all this? You have a car in your garage, some money in the bank, you have your health, everything, but you can't do anything rather than looking at nature and enjoying life. So all complexities that man has created is of no use. Lalita Jeevitham is what you have been supposed to do. So please read that book also. That is my new philosophy.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
So shall I announce your?
Can I ask a question to Jayakumar sir?
Please. Jamile. Dr. Jamile.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very enlightening and interesting talk on Keats, one of my favorite poets of all time. Actually, I was just going to talk about this notion of integration with nature, particularly during this COVID time. It has really brought us very close to nature. And every time you think of Keats, one of the things that he has highlighted again and again is this, the Ode to the Nightingale, where he is in the midst of nature and the communion that you have with nature. So he's celebrating Keats at this time, particularly the University College. Congratulations to them. And I think this is also, as you said, a new approach of looking at Keats not as a nature poet. We have always looked at him as a nature poet, as someone who has talked about something that is outside of himself. Today, I think it's time to be talking about nature as a part of him, part of Keats' life, and as something that really touched him on all fronts. You talked about the notion of human relationships that he had when you were talking about his relationship with nature. Would you like to make a kind of comparison between the two? How did he see human relations in the context of his association with nature?
I would not venture to answer that because I really do not have the facts with me. I think you are a better person to answer, Jamila, teacher Anna. I don't have the time also, nor am I competent to answer. That's a complicated question. We have to go into details. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it offers a lot of scope, especially his relationship with his brother, his dying
exactly.
brother,
It's a,
his love, Fanny Brown.
I will not venture into it because it takes us into all kinds of other areas.
Actually, our teachers could think about that in this forum. How do we relate nature to human relationships and how he approaches human relationships?
Dr. Rajendran, shall we announce this? I've been asked to announce these prizes, which has been kept as a secret.
Yes,
Shall
sure, sir.
Shall I do it now?
Yeah, yes, sure, sir.
Okay. Now I have been asked to sort of make these dramatic announcements. So National Recitation Competition for students. The results are first prize. Actually, one should start from third prize, and the first prize should come at the end, isn't it, Aishwarya? That is a way of dramatic announcement. So I'll start with third prize, and third prize goes to Ananya S. Ashok, NSS College, Niramankara, Trivandrum. And the second prize for recitation goes to Natasha Cheris, Vimila College, Thrissur. And of course, the first prize, Shubhradeep Sarkar, Ganga Rampur College, Bengal. That is okay. That is the recitation. And now diary writing competition for college teachers. That goes to, I think it is not first. Oh, it's first, second, third. Now the first prize goes to Shambhu R, NSS College, Pandala. And second prize to Neeta Prasad, SD College, Alappuzha. And the third prize to Indu Balachandran, SN College, Chennai. Thank you very much. This is it. So shall I exit this thing, or is there a formal vote of thanks or something? Even otherwise, I'll assume that you have
Poetry writing competition is also there. I think
I've always, juggled with this poetry and civil service and literature and everything, So, but time management is the essence. So, 12 മണി വരെ ഇരുന്ന സമയമുള്ളൂ. So, before I conclude, I should congratulate the English department of University College, because University College has been in the news for always wrong reasons. But these are some of the occasions where you should be in the news for the right reasons, good reasons. And I'm happy that the Department of English is taking an interest in this kind of programs, which brings in people from outside. Not great people, but you should bring greater people than me, not people like me, because this platform also offers opportunity to bring in anybody from anywhere. You should use that opportunity, and our children should be able to sort of think beyond the confines of the syllabus and the confines of their local issues, beyond these things. And that is the only way to nurture our young people. I'm happy that University College has taken this lead. So maybe another occasion, if you invite me, I should be happy to come and talk to you later when we are able to remove our masks and unmask ourselves. I'll definitely come and unmask my soul to you. Thank you very much. But please popularize these quotable quotes like an unkissed kiss is better than a kissed kiss. These are all.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the kind words. If you don't mind, we had one more competition result which we had sent you, I think. Poetry competition.
Sorry. Diary writing? besides?
Question പറയുന്നില്ല പറയുന്നുണ്ട്
അല്ല
പറയാം
അല്ല വന്നിട്ടില്ല. only diary writing.
Can forward that, please.
I think you yourself. Why don't you announce instead of sending it to me and then I announcing it? It's all the same platform. Why don't you announce?
Ma'am, you're muted.
അല്ല അവിടെ announce ചെയ്താൽ മതി.
Okay,
Rajendra can announce. It has not come to me.
The first prize for poetry writing, students, National Poetry Writing Competition for students, goes to Subradeep Sarkar. And second prize to Natasha Teres. And third prize to Ananya Ashok. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and for your wonderful lecture. May I please invite Professor and Dr. Deepa Prasad for a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Aishwarya. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, okay. Respected Chief Guest, Dr. K. Jayakumar, respected Principal, Dr. B. Unnikrishnan, Dr. C. C. Babu, Dr. K. Ratha, Dr. Jamila Begum, Head of the Department, Praveena, Convener of the Department Research Forum, Dr. T. K. Rajendran, colleagues, dear students and friends from other colleges. We are gathered here to commemorate the 200th anniversary of John Keats. He who wrote that a thing of beauty is a joy forever, who thought that here lies one whose name was written water, would probably have never imagined that 200 years hence, people would be commemorating his memory, cherishing his lines and the thoughts, and of course his famous sensibility. And who else is better to recreate the charm of the young poet than the person who launched 1,000 Malayalis into aspiring for the civil service, whose hands crafted the unforgettable lyrics that epitomized the soft romantic emotions trapped inside the Machumallu by comparing the soft love to the fragrance of a Chandana labor. Dr. K. Jayakumar, legendary son of a legendary father, administrator and academician, poet and translator, who could easily strike different worlds with an ease and charm that is simply unique to him, has indeed honored us, our department and our college, with his fascinating lecture on one of the most beloved poets in English literature. Listening to him elaborate on the poetic genius of Keats makes us realize what a loss it has been for the academic world when he opted for the administrative success. From Greek mythology that inspired Keats and the major thematic concerns that are found peppered in Keats's poems, Dr. Jayakumar has presented the spectrum of Keats's poetry and life to us, occasionally connecting his poetry to Indian aesthetics as well. It was quite a spectacular trip, sir. And on behalf of the University College and the Department of English and the participants, I thank you for this wonderful lecture. Thank you, sir. We had organized a couple of competitions in connection with this event, and let me express our gratitude to all those who participated in it, and also special thanks to the judges who helped us out of the event for deciding the winners. Vinay sir, Dr. Bhadra, Sudha ma'am, Alpha ma'am, LC ma'am, and Dr. Krishna Prabha, all former faculties of our department who spared moments from their busy schedule and helped us out. We are hugely indebted to you. Thank you all. On behalf of the department, let me thank Dr. B. Unnikrishnan, our principal, who supported us